This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're going to be traveling all over to different continents. We're going to be going by land, maybe going through some forests. Maybe we'll be going by air and flying over some valleys and mountains. And sometimes we'll be going by sea. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. This is the first grandiose game from Gamelyn Games, who's known for making the Tiny Epic series. It's a 1-to-4 game that is a 4X game. So I'm going to take a look at this and tell you what I think. Now if you know about this game, don't skip the overview because I've recently gotten some new equipment and lenses. I'm going to be able to show you off these amazing production components at a closer level than you're used to seeing. So without further ado, let's get going. Now I first want to show you this box because it is huge, and so here's it by itself. But what happens when we put a standard Ticket to Ride size box on top of it? You can actually see how big this box really is. So I've lined it up in the upper left hand corner so it shows you how much larger in this direction and in this direction the box is. But when you look at the height of the boxes, it really dwarfs it there. It's almost twice as big from the height perspective. Now the reason for that huge box is because there's miniatures for all the 4 factions that comes in the game. Each faction comes with its own board. We'll go over the details of these later, but you have the orcs, the humans, the dwarves, and the elves. So let's take a look at these components in more detail. Now each faction comes with warriors and peons. The warriors here are going to be on the left and the peons are going to be on the right. And I'm going to show you a peon and a warrior for each of the factions. And here we're looking at the ones for the human faction. Now we're looking at them for the dwarfs faction. Now we're looking at them for the elves faction. And finally for the orcs faction. Now each faction has 3 heroes. The only difference between the retail version and the version I'm showing you are these 3 heroes for each faction, where here they're pre-painted minis, but in the retail version of the game they are not painted, and here are the 3 heroes for the humans faction. Here are the 3 heroes for the dwarf faction. Here are the 3 heroes for the elves faction. And the heroes for the orcs faction. Now all the miniatures are about the same size, and this last one I'm showing you in scale to a quarter. Now each of the factions also get their own sea vessel that they'll use throughout the game, and from left to right we have the orcs. This is the war croc, as it looks like a crocodile. And then we have the dwarfs barge, then the humans galley, and then the elves corsair. And here we are looking at it from the table level. Each of the factions also gets an airship. From left to right, we have the dragon, the griffin, the airship, and the phoenix. And here we are looking at them from the side angle. And here I have the board set up for a 2-player game where you only use 3 of the 4 continents on the main board. You'd use the 4th continent in a 3 or 4-player game, but this will allow me to show it to you with a little bit more ease. Now over the course of the game, you're going to be gaining points by building your capital city up to a level or a level 3, as well as placing towers out on different continents. Now each player starts with their own faction board and 2 serfs and a warrior, but you'll also be getting points over the course of the game by recruiting more warriors. After building buildings, you'll be able to recruit some heroes for points, and some of the ships and sea vessels, as I told you before. Then you'll also be able to get points by casting spells. Those are most of the ways that you gain points, of course in combat as well, that we'll go over later. Now the way the game works is it's 2 rounds you'll go through, and each round you'll be using this to take an action. There's 2 types of actions. Command actions are on this right side, capital actions are on the left side. So let's say you want to take a command action. You take one of your actions and you put it on one of these that don't already have an action. For example, march. You could move troops into a different area. Everybody here in your courtyard is considered in your capital city. So let's say we wanted to march. Now your serfs and warriors can march 2 or 3 respectively, and you always have to move as the slowest person. So if we brought a serf and warrior, you'd have to move up to 2, not 3. So let's say we move them up to 2 from the capital city, 1, 2. So let's say we go in here. Anytime you end in a spot, you flip over this exploration token. Now these do all sorts of different things. Sometimes you might just find some resources. So in this case, you would get 1 ore and this would get discarded. And all your resources are tracked here. Generally, ore is used to build, food's used to recruit new characters, and the mana is used for spells. Now there's all sorts of different exploration tokens. You can pause here if you want to read the details of many of these, but I'm going to move on. Now normally it'd be the end of my turn and we'd go to the next player clockwise. However, when you make a command action, you can muster, which is if you have another serf in your courtyard, you can place it on one of the open actions in the command actions to basically take a second action on your turn. So I could march again, or if I had a ship, I could sail it up to 3 spots. Or if I had the airship, I could fly up to 4 spots. Or here I could cast a spell. Let's talk about spells. Now there's spells that you can cast, because they say cast on them, you'd spend mana to be able to do that, and then it's cast here, and then you could actually use this spell to do different things. For example, take a serf from your supply and place it into any region. So that's just your general supply, but after you use it, it spins around like this, and at the end of each round, it's going to turn 90, and turn 90, and then it's available again to use. And of course, you'd get these points for doing this. You'd also get a point here as well at the end of the game. Now there are some other spell cards that you'll use, not necessarily when you cast spells, but during combat or when you're trying to interrupt somebody else's spell. It would move to the next player's turn, and then it would continue going. Now let's say on a subsequent turn, I want to come over here and do a capital action. If I come here, I can recruit, which means if, let's see, if I want a serf, I could spend 1 food to bring 1 serf on here, or I could spend 3 food to bring 2 serfs into my courtyard. Remember, they're considered to be in your capital city. Or I could spend 2 food and bring in 1 of the warriors onto my board, for example. Now these are able to be followed by other opponents. So for example, if somebody else chose one of these actions on their turn, everyone else simultaneously could spend a serf if they had one in their courtyard. They could place it on their board to then do an action that they have not yet done. So this is done when follow other people's actions. A different action you could take is to build. Now you can build a bunch of different things. You can build any of these buildings here, for example, the air spire, the sea dock, the tavern, the university, the cathedral. And these buildings essentially require 3 ore plus a serf, because what you would do is, let's say I had a serf in my courtyard, I would spend 3 ore, go down here, and then you could build one of these by placing a serf there. For example, if I wanted the sea dock, I would place it here. This shows that this is now built. And so in a future turn, I could essentially, when I recruited, I could now recruit the galley, which would be to spend 2 food and 2 ore, and then I would get the galley, which we could use to move and carry units. And as we showed you earlier, this ship would go docked to your capital city, and you could put up to 2 units in here and take them around and go through sea and stuff like that. Let's bring us to the next point about building. This building is built, and we have a level 1 capital city, that's what you start with, so this ability is now active, which means the galley, our sea ship, collects 2 food if in a sea region. However, if during a build action on a subsequent turn, we wanted to build up to a level 2 capital city, we need to spend 4 ore, 4 mana, and 4 food, and then we built it up to a second level. This will give us 5 points at the end, but also will unlock any of these second level abilities that we have a building in. So now, in addition to this, we'd have, hey, when in a sea region, the galley may start a battle with units in an adjacent region, and you get +1. So these get to get triggered up depending on what building and what level your capital city is. And if on your turn you had 777 for the different resources, you could upgrade from a second level capital city to the 3rd level. And again, that's going to get you even more points at the end of the game. Unlock all the 3rd level abilities for any buildings you have. And it's going to obviously give you more attack power as well. And so as you build up that capital city, it will be getting built on like this to show what level you're at. When building, you could also, you're only building one thing, but you could also build a tower. And it depends on how far away it is from your capital city, how many ore you'd spend, and that tower is going to give you 3 basically attack value there. And when you do build that tower, again, it has to be, you can normally only do 1 on each continent. In a 2-player game, you could do up to 2 on each continent. And it ends up triggering one of the end games if you have built them all. We'll go over that in just a moment. Just the last 2 possible things you could do on your turn is if I had done nothing over here, I could research, which is drawing the top 3 spells, and then selecting 1 to keep. Now the amount of spells that you actually can have at one time depends on what level your capital city is. Right here I can only have 1 tower if I'm at level 1 and 1 spell. 2 towers and 2 spells at level 2, and 3 towers, 3 spells at level 3. So as you get up your capital city, it unlocks not only better abilities, but also more towers and spells. and taxing allows you to take a certain amount of a resource depending where this is at, and then everything then slides up like this. And at the end of the round, everyone's gonna be gathering resource, and that will depend on how many serfs you have in a specific region, depending on some regions will allow you to have one in there gathering resources, some more than one. Also, if you have towers, you'll get more resources, and for controlling a region, you'll get resources. And depending on the land, this is gonna get you food because it's yellow, or in the mountains, and mana in the forests. And you'll be moving those up on your resource counters. Now, as the game goes on, you'll be able to build buildings, which will then allow you to recruit one of the 3 different heroes that you have. Each of the heroes that you have are unique. They show you, depending on your capital city, level 1, 2, or 3, what abilities have been unlocked for them. Gives you their attack value, their move value, how many points you'll get at the end of the game for recruiting them. And so each one faction is very different in this regard. So over the course of the game, you'll be moving, sometimes through ferries to other lands, sometimes with your airship, sometimes with your sea, seeing exploration even in the sea. And eventually you may end up actually moving and getting where another enemy is, where things stop and combat happens. Now, combat in this game does not use dice. Each player gets 7 cards, the same 7 cards. And so some of them do different things. For example, some of them can only be used by the attacker, some of them only by the defender. And it's sort of a guessing game trying to figure out who's going to do what. For example, this one would add 2 to your attack value for a strike, but you have to pay 4 mana to use it. And it cancels the conscripts card, which is this one, which allows them, if they played it and it wasn't canceled, would allow them to move units from adjacent regions and from any region using this in the same continent into battle. And they'll spend enough food depending on how many people they use. Someone might use charge, which is 6 mana. It cancels the retreat. So these cards sort of a lot of times cancels another one, plus gives you plus positive attack if they played a different one. So you're looking at these interactions, you're looking at what resources they have, and you're trying to figure out what are they likely to play depending on what is our natural strength at that point. For example, here I have a warrior and a serf, which equals 3 strength. They have 1 serf, which is equal 1, so I'm up 2 on them. However, before the battle, somebody might want to play a combat spell, and then the other player also gets to possibly play one. That might change things, and then you're going to select a card face down at the same time, reveal, and then see if any of these cancel, add up the positives, and see who wins the battle. Now, if you're able to play the card, it doesn't get canceled, and you're able to pay for it, you'll get some points as well, whether or not you lose the battle or win it, and the attacker always gets 1 point for initiating the battle anyways. But if you can't even pay for that, let's say I had 3 instead of 4 mana, you can actually sacrifice one of your people, put them sideways, and then their strength value adds to this, but they go back to your home at the end. So there's a lot of tactical choices here during battle. But of course, sea vessels and airships add attack values, and towers add attack values, and if you're in a capital city, those add attack values. And the loser will end up losing units depending on their natural strength. It's half rounded up and things like that. Now, the game ends once one of the 4 X's has been completed. For example, if you've explored, meaning all of these tokens on the board are flipped face up, or you've expanded, meaning all of their units are put in play, meaning on your board or out on the board itself or in your courtyard. Also, if you've built all 3 towers, or if you've gone and defeated someone's capital city. In that case, they're out of the game, they can't even win. But once one of those 4 things happens, you play one more full round, and then you see who wins at the final scoring after that. Now, there's a solo version. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially you flip the board over, and this player has their 3 heroes, and there's a whole enemy action deck. And what's going to happen is each round, one will get flipped over. They'll see if they can do this action or not, depending on how many resources they have. If they can't, they always move in the direction of this compass. And after they do this, then you get a normal turn. Then another card gets flipped here, and you see if they resolve it or not. Then you get another turn, and then they flip a card here and do this. And so they're getting 3 actions per round. You're only getting 2. And generally, that's how it works. There's a lot more to it of how many resources they have to do to advance their capital city. If they ever get here, it ends. They have specific spells they can use. There's a lot more going on here, but I just wanted to show you that it is available, and that's generally how it works. Well, let's first start off with the amazing production and table presence that this game has. My gosh, that box is huge because there's so much stuff in there. All the minis from the 4 different factions. And as you're playing this game, the thing starts to go 3-dimensional with the capitals and the towers and the airships going by, and people will stop by and go, what the heck are you playing? This game has amazing table presence, and it's an awesome production value. I like that there's the different factions, and each of them feel different. And it's not just like, hey, you get like 1 or 2 things that you can do different. It's like, wow, you've got 3 heroes, and each of them have 3 different abilities. Then you have all of the different buildings that you built for those 3 different heroes. and 3 different levels of abilities. And then you have the ship and the sea vessel, and you've got 3 different levels of abilities there. It's like, wow, each of these factions have so many differences. I think it's really cool because it really makes the game feel different depending on which faction you're in. It's just almost overwhelming how many different abilities you can have between the different factions. I like, and about those ability tracks, it's just like you can choose. Like maybe for one faction you really like what the sea does, but you don't. Maybe the airship one doesn't really tickle your fancy that much. But maybe one of those heroes has the building that you build for them is really cool. So I like it because there's different tracks you can go up. I like how that as you build up on the different levels of the capital city, that a lot of those specific abilities kind of like compound. It's like the same type of thing, but it gets better and it gets better. And I think that's a really cool aspect of those different tracks. I love the follow action. This brought me, as soon as I played this, I was like, oh, they're going back to Tiny Epic Galaxy. I love the follow action there, and I love it here. It keeps things moving. When it's other players' turns and they're taking one of those capital actions, well, you can take it too if you hadn't taken it before, as long as you got a serf there. And I like that aspect of being able to do things on other people's turns and deciding, do I really want to spend a serf to do that, or should I wait another round to do that? And on the other side, you have those command actions that you can muster, and I like that too. Same, sometimes grueling decision where it's like, I've only got 1 serf left. Should I really use it to muster and do my second one, or am I going to need that later? And a lot of things to think about, but I like it. You get more workers, you get more serfs, and you have more options to follow, but you also have more options to muster, where you could probably march once, muster, march twice, and then start a battle that maybe the other player didn't really see coming. I like that aspect of it. I like that there's many different ways to get points. You know, you're going to build up your capital city, you're going to build up the towers. How far away are you going to build the towers? Is it worth it to go further? All the different warriors that you're going to get, all the different heroes you're going to recruit, the different spells. How many spells have you cast? Lots of different things. And then the battles, by starting battles, and the different cards that you select for battles. So I like that there's a lot of different ways to get points. Speaking of the combat system, I really like the aspect of this. No dice. You know going in what the natural strengths are, then you got to decide which of these identical 7 cards to play. And it's really a battle of the minds, a little bit of head faking, some bluffing, some double bluffing, knowing that they probably want to do this, and you could play a card that could cancel that. They know that. So are they going to do something different, or are they going to do that? Well, they might not have enough resources to pay for this card, but they do have enough strength that they could sacrifice to then have enough to do it. Are they willing to do that? I don't know. It's a great thing to think about, and it gives you a lot to think about in this battle system. It's pretty simple. You're just selecting a card and doing it, but the amount of thought and the options that you have in this make it really good. And I like how the game can end in one of those 4 different ways based upon the 4 X's, whether you've explored enough, or exploited, or expanded, or exterminated. I like that it keeps true to that 4X and making each one of those a possible endgame condition. I like that this is sort of an epic game. It feels like an epic game, but it's done in about 30 minutes per player once you all know what you're doing. I think that's not too much time. In fact, it's a small amount of time to fit in a game that feels this grandiose. And I like how the box, now the box is huge, but I like how it can fit everything, including the constructs already built. So you just got to build them that one time, and they all can fit in there. That's why that box is so big. Any cons to this? Well, speaking of those constructs, they take time to build. About an hour to put together the game for the first time. Now, I know some people actually enjoy this, so this isn't going to be a con for everybody. They like getting into new things, they like building it up. It's part of the experience for them. And for you, that's great. For some people, it might take a little longer than they had hoped. But again, you're only doing it once, so it's not that big a deal. This game might be a little combat heavy for some. You know, some people have played Scythe. It's a game that I like. And the combat in that game is more about, you know, pretending or having the ability to combat, but it's not a major part of the game. It is a major part of this game where you're building up, you're expanding out, and you are going to try to exterminate people and go over there and battle them, because you're going to get points to do so. It encourages it. So this game is pretty battle heavy, and it might be a little too battle heavy for some. I actually prefer less battle heavy games, but because the system was so intriguing, it didn't bother me that much. And finally, the combat. Again, you have so many choices that if you're playing with a decent sized group and you're not in that battle, there really is a lot of thinking. It's pretty mathy. You're trying to calculate their strength versus yours, and what you could do and what they could do, and then maybe you have a spell that can change things. And maybe they have a sea vessel or an airship or somebody else that can possibly change things. And There's just a lot of things that can go on, and if you have somebody with AP in your group, it might be a little overwhelming, the amount of choices and thinking that you can do in that combat, and other people aren't doing anything while this is going on, and that could be a problem for some groups. So just keep that in mind. But overall, this is not a standard style game that is in my wheelhouse. It's a little bit larger than I typically like. But I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. Just the whole package together, the production value, the way of going out and exploring and everything. I really like this game much more than I thought I would. Again, that whole package really blew me away. And quite honestly, if the production value wasn't as good, I probably wouldn't have liked it as much, but it really does draw me in. I love the tracks. And for that reason, and because it's such a big, grandiose game that doesn't take 4 or 5 hours to play, I mean, we're talking 90 minutes to 2 hours, most likely, with most groups. And that I can play that because when I'm into it, I know a lot of my friends are going to like this. So without further ado, let's induct it properly with a saxophone serenade.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.